Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to episode 3 of ShaggyTV. It's been a little while. I want to first apologize for the lack of show last week. We took a little 4th of July vacation to celebrate America. So that's why we didn't have a video last week, and I really apologize about that. I'm sorry, but here's episode 3. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, which I know you will. I'm just going to dive right into this very quickly because it's going to be a big show today. I have tons of cards to talk about and stuff, so I'm going to hurry up to talk about this so you guys know all about it. First, the question, really quick, is from Abrams. I'm not going to read his whole comment because that would be annoying. But the thing I want to talk about is right here. He says, I think going through cards that are solely capable to be cards in a digital format would be a good video subject. And right, he is, because that's actually an awesome subject and something that I've always wanted to talk about. I know me and John talked about maybe even doing a team show about it or whatever. So I'm really excited to get into it because basically what I want to talk about is how some cards in Hex will be very difficult for other traditional card games to copy or to have cards like that, because Hex is a digital-only game. There are obviously cards that can only be used in that format. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the cards that could kind of easily be copied into a card game, a traditional card game, and the ones that would be almost impossible. So from easy to like super hard, I'm going to go through them really quickly and hopefully have a good show for you guys. So the first one I want to start off with is just basically talk about the two general mechanics that I think are just hard to copy for traditional card games, like the basic mechanics of Hex that like a card game couldn't copy. So like the first one we'll talk about is the permanent effect. Like Hex does have an effect that it's just like this permanently increases, like this creature gets permanent +1/+1. So that card is bounced back into your hand or it's killed and you bring it back from the graveyard, it still has +1/+1. Like traditionally in paper games like Magic or other card games like WoW, the World of Warcraft trading card game, you just use counters. So you just put like a dice on it, and then if it dies, you take the dice off and it's still a 1/1, or if it gets knocked back in your hand, you take the dice off. And like it's really hard to like keep the dice on your card, right? Like you can't like glue the dice on your card and be like, yes, it stays a 1/1 or 3/3 or whatever. So the first card that I'm going to show you guys, it kind of just shows that effect and how kind of difficult that would be the old Wildebeest here, which is one of my favorite cards. It's been spoiled so far, but basically the Wildebeest is a 1-drop 3/3 with speed, which is haste. Means it can attack the first turn it's out. It says at the end of the turn, shuffle this troop into your deck. If you do, it gets permanent +3/+3 and permanently loses this power. So basically what happens is you draw him out, you can play him out on turn 1, right? And then he's a 3/3 with speed. So you just attack. At the end of the turn, he gets 3 more power, so he gets 3 power, 3 toughness, he becomes a 6/6 and gets shuffled back into your deck. Like that's easy to copy for a game, right? A game could easily be like, this guy comes out, attacks, now put it back in your deck. That's easy. The hard part though, and this kind of goes with the permanent thing, is to make him stay a 6/6, right? Because if you have 4 copies of this guy in your deck, or 2 or 3, it's impossible for you to tell what copy of the card was actually in play, right? Like there could be some ways we could fix this for the paper games, right? Like we could use like a marker or something and mark the card, and then if we draw it again, it would be very clear that that was the card we drew. But it's just like sketchy things like that are kind of hard for paper games to do, right? Like yes, they could do it, but it's going to be very like I'm gonna say basically it's like the quality of life, right? For the players, for the judges, is very tough. So this is a perfect card to show that just a permanent effect, just a basic mechanic of Hex, is very hard for a game, a paper game, to copy. So the next is a keyword that I really like. I think it's going to be really cool, and my favorite card to show that is Escalation. Now Escalation is a really cool, oh my gosh, I can't make this bigger, is a really cool keyword, and it's one that I think that other card games would have done sooner if they had the ability to, right? Because we've seen keywords similar to it in like Magic and other card games, but like the exact way Escalation works is so hard. So we'll take Ragefire for example. 2-drop, deal 2 damage to target champion or troop. Very simple, right? Obviously that can be copied. But here's the tricky part: is Escalation. As this action resolves, shuffle it into your deck, then double the bold number, which this case is 2. And the text of each card with the same name as this action. If you do action in your deck, hand, and graveyard. So basically, like if you have Ragefire, let's say you have 1 in your graveyard, right, and you have 2 in your hand. Well, actually not graveyard, because let's say you have just 2 in your hand. Okay, so you play 1, right? It deals 2 damage, and then it shuffles back into your deck. Great. So like the 1 in your hand now does 4 damage. right? So you play it. You're like, I deal 4 damage. It shuffles back into your deck, right? You draw another copy next turn. You're like, I'm awesome. Draw another copy. Now this one deals 8, right? And that's so hard to keep track of, right? Like you could with dice, right? You keep a little dice out and be like, sure, like this is the first time I used it, so we'll make a dice, you know, it's 1, and then like the second time turn to 2. Like you could do it, but again, it's a quality of life thing that's very hard for players and judges to keep track of, right? And especially since it shuffles back into your deck, right? So it's impossible for like a judge or a player to look at your graveyard and see how many you've cast, or you know, to have a way for them to tell, right? You could say I cast 12, and it'd be impossible to tell if you did or not, other than like, you know, maybe it being recorded or something really weird, hard way for it to do. So escalation, just again, just a keyword, is very hard for paper games to take to copy. So next I'm going to move into kind of easy cards you can copy, really cool cards, but you know, cards that these games could easily take advantage of. So like one of the ways I'm going to start, sorry, I'm like loading these cards up, so I'm sorry if I'm kind of staring off into space. Apologize. I just do that randomly, by the way. Sometimes I'll just go into a stare off in space thing, I guess. So the first card that's like would be very easy for a card game to copy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be wise for them to copy, right? Like it would be easy for them to do, but it would still be a little tricky. And it's also Hex will always do it better, right? Because it's a digital card game, and actually just because Hex is a digital card game, a lot of things will just do better. So like even just like drawing a card or shuffling your deck, right? Like a digital card game will always do better because you don't have to do it, right? So the games will be faster because the game will shuffle the deck for you and things like that. But anyway, we'll move on to this card. So basically this card starts off with this. I'm not going to go over the card too much because I want to make this pretty quick. Basically, you start out with this card, you tap it, it turns into this card, and then if you have 7 or more cards in your hands, it turns into this card, right? The effects are easy to do, right? The problem I think that a lot of people would think about is like it's hard for this card to be manipulated in a physical card game because it's created. But really, all you would have to do is just take the cards. I have a couple decks. I have the deck here, kind of. But you can just take the cards, right? The 2 cards, and just set them off to the side, right? And then you have this card, right? It's here. Okay, and then once you transform it, you would just bring the new card in, right? And then since it permanently stays out, right? So like if you have the second one, right, and it dies, right, and you bring it back, it stays the second version. So it would be easy to kind of manipulate and keep in the game. I don't think it would be that hard to do it in a game. I just think it would be very difficult for the players to maybe keep track. It's something that's kind of clumsy, right? Like, I don't think you want to take the players too much outside of the cards. Like, you don't want to take them outside of the card game that they're playing. Like, I think a lot of a lot of companies design their games to be played more of like a, they don't want the players to kind of come out of the game very much. So that's the way that you could maybe copy that, but it's obviously very tough. The next card, which I think is really cool, is the old Bone Warrior, right? He's really cool. I'll let you guys read that real quick. I'll pop the second one out real quick. I'm sorry again that this is so clumsy and so hard. But basically, Bone Warrior is a 2-drop 1/2. I put it over my face, hope you guys don't mind. Anyway, he's a 2-drop 1/2. If he dies, he turns into a pile of bones, which is this. Alright, so like this is like so cool, right? And if you also if you pay 4 mana, you can just transform back to Bone Warrior, which is really cool. So like the easiest way that like other games could copy this kind of effect, I'm trying to think of the best place to put this freaking pile of bones. Anyway, the easiest way for a company to copy this effect would be something that Magic did very recently with Innistrad, and that's with the old like card like Delver Secrets, right? So you have Delver, he has text here. I'm sorry that you guys can't read this very well, but basically at the start of your turn, you look at the top card of your deck. If it's an instant or sorcery, he flips. Okay, so he's a 1/1. Okay, for 1. Oh, actually, it's opposite. 1/1 for 1, and then if you flip him, he turns into a 3/2 flyer, right? This card was retardedly broken, right? It was really good. It's obviously was one of the best cards of Standard for its time that it was in there. But basically, what they could do is just do the same thing with the Bone Warrior, right? Like he's this. When he dies, he flips. You pay 4, you flip them back, right? That'd be a very easy way for the game to copy a card like Bone Warrior. But the problem with it is even with the flip cards, they were so clumsy and they were so weird. If you didn't use sleeves, they were really hard to use. Plus, you had players like taking them out the sleeves and flipping them and stuff. They were just kind of a clumsy way. It was really cool and they're really neat, sure. But again, Hex can just do this so much easier and so much seamless. It's seamlessly better. So I think that that's again a pretty easy card for traditional card games to copy, but it's just the ease of which Hex does it is amazing. Like, it's really nice. It's gonna be really cool for players to be able to experience that. So the next card is Sabotage, which was actually our viewer card that he wanted to for us to talk about. So here we go. So Sabotage is a 3-drop spell, basic action, which is a sorcery that you play. When you do, you create 4 booby traps, which are these cards over here, and then you shuffle those into your opponent's deck. So booby trap basically is just if you draw it, you take 5. Okay, so the easy way to do this with Magic would be to just have your deck. Okay, you'd have to basically limit, like you'd have to say that like if you come to a tournament you have to have X amount of extra sleeves, right? And then you just sleeve up copies of Booby Trap, which would be something like this, right? And then you just shuffle them into your deck, right? Just real quick, I'm gonna shuffle real quick here, okay? And then alright, it's shuffled. So your opponent goes and he draws. Oh look, he got a booby trap. He takes 5 damage, right? It'd be pretty easy to do, right? You could do that, but you'd have to put all kind of restrictions on players. Like you have to either bring sleeves, or you'd have to just make a sleeve that like everyone has to use, right? Like a Magic tournament sleeve that only those kind of tournament players can use. That way people can bring their like own booby traps and sleeve them. You could do it, but it'd be I'm not gonna say impossible, but it'd be very tough to not only like have the judge regulate it, but have players understand it. Any kind of little rule like that you add into a game is very tough for new players. Like new players might want to come with their pink shiny, unicorn sleeves, and they're like, "Can I use these?" No, you can't, because you have to use these special sleeves. So you could do it, but it's just very, very difficult. So Sabotage, really awesome card, and cards like this is what's going to make Hex such a great game and such a unique game for cards, for a unique card game. Okay, go to my next card here real quick. This card is awesome. This is like one of my favorite cards. Every time I talk about this game, I always talk about this card. The card is bad. I'm going to first say the card's pretty terrible, but it's really fun to talk about because it's kind of a card that you don't have much in traditional card games. So anytime I talk about this game, there's a couple cards that I use, but this is one of my favorite ones to do because it's just like the secretly choose mechanic is so cool. So we'll talk about the card real quick. It's a 4-drop. It's called Head Games, basic action, which is basically a sorcery. You can only use it on your turn. Secretly choose 5 or 10. Target opposing champion guesses which number you choose. If they guess incorrectly, deal damage to them equal to the number you choose. If they guess correctly, deal damage to you equal to the number you choose. So it's really, really cool. Basically, you take the card and you play it, and you'll say, once you play it, I'm guessing like a thing will come up, either click 5 or 10. The opponent, the same thing will happen to the opponent. If they guess the number right, then you take that amount of damage. If they guess it wrong, they take that amount of damage. So it's really neat. It's a cool concept. It's something that you could do in real life, right? Like you could just take like a piece of paper and just write down 5 or 10 and then lay it face down and have your opponent do the same thing. If they match, you take damage. If they don't, they take damage. Pretty cool, right? But it's like, again, that you have to have people now bring paper to a tournament, which, I guess most people do, right? Like, at least I did. I always kept my life total on paper, but like, it's still like that thing that's like, some people don't. Some people use their like cell phone to like use a life tracker and take their life total. It's like making everybody do a uniform thing. It's kind of tricky for tournaments and companies. So, Head Games is again a neat card for the format. It's a bad card, but it's a neat card with what it does. So, moving on to old Pack Raptor, which I think is really, really neat. Pack Raptor is a 1-drop, 1/1 that has haste. No, wait, first strike. I'm sorry. First strike. When this troop enters play, create 4 Pack Raptors and shuffle them into your deck. This troop gets +1/+1 for each other Pack Raptor you control. So I think that's awesome. Neat card. Really cool mechanics, right? Super straightforward, right? He comes in, you make 4 copies of him and put him in your deck, right? And like you could do that in Magic, right? You could easily just be like, oh, that's no problem. I have 4 tokens and I'll sleeve them and then I'll put them in my deck, right? But the problem is eventually you're going to have so many copies of this guy that like you can't have that. Like you're going to have to bring 50 tokens. Like there will be games where that might happen. And like if that does happen, it's very, very, it starts like, if you don't have a token in Magic when you play in tournaments, right, or any card game like WoW or anything, if you don't have a token, it's not a big deal, right? You just make like, you just take a card or a sleeve or something and you just lay it face down and be like, this is this. And like it's usually pretty, like it's pretty standard. Like obviously like people like for you to have tokens, but there's ways around it, right? You can bring in a Pokemon card and be like, this is a, you know, whatever, this is a pack raptor, right? But like, since you make these copies of these cards and shuffle them into your deck, you can't do that anymore, right? You can't. You have to actually have pack raptors, right? So like, you could solve it by just having a crap ton of pack raptors, but like, that's gonna be retarded. Then, like, you know, all of a sudden, like, pack raptor tokens are gonna be sold for like, you know, $1, $2 a piece because people need a bunch of them. It's gonna be really hard, or really confusing thing to do. So it could be done, but it's very difficult. And like, the way that Hex does it is neat. Like, they just shuffle them. It's really cool. So it's a neat card, even cooler mechanic. So moving on to, also, like, just while we're on the topic of tokens in Hex, the way they do tokens would be an easy way for Magic to copy their tokens. I think, like, just all you have to do is just print a mana like symbol like on the card, and that way you can replay tokens. I think that's such a cool idea. Like, I'm surprised they haven't adopted that yet. Like, I know that like Hearthstone, like a new game coming out made by Blizzard, does that with their tokens as well. Like, a lot of digital games are really starting to make like their tokens replayable, so like they don't just die to like unsummon effects. So that's really cool. Like, I think that's that more games need to adopt that, because it's not that difficult. Like, it's not really a digitally only thing for your token to have a mana cost. Like, I'm not really sure why more companies don't do that. So next one, this is like the last of like the easy cards that you can copy. This is Blessing the Fallen. It's a constant, which is like an enchantment. It stays out all the time. Troops you control are inspired by troops with Inspire in your graveyard as though they were in play. So basically, the way the Inspire mechanic works, real quick, I probably should have had a card to explain it, I'm sorry. But basically, like, if a card has Inspire, it does the Inspire effect it has to every creature that is higher cost than it, right? So like, if it has haste, for example, right? Every creature that's higher than it will also have haste, right? So the way this works is, if the creature dies and goes to your graveyard, then all of your creatures that are alive are still inspired as though they were in play. So that's like a super powerful effect, and this card is like bonkers. Like, it's going to be played a lot in like the human inspired decks, and I think it's such a cool card. But the thing about it is, obviously, that effect seems really easy to copy in traditional traditional card games. It's not too hard, right? But the problem is, it's super slow, and it's like, if you play this card out, all of a sudden, every single time a creature dies and goes to your graveyard that has Inspire, you have to make that clear to your opponent, right? Like, you have to be like, this guy died, so now I have this effect, and like, my haste guy died, so I have this effect, and you might have to go through your graveyard. The bigger your graveyard gets, the more annoying it's going to be, and it's just like such a time sink, where in Hex, this will actually just instantly happen, right? The game does it for you if it works. I mean, like, I know we saw it in the playtesting video. We saw that like it didn't work properly, but like, once they get it working, obviously, the game will just do it for you. And I think that's going to be, you know, things like that are like, just quality of life changes are so underrated, I feel like, so far in Hex. People don't realize, like, they're more interested in the flashy cards like Booby Trap, and they don't understand cards like this are so hard for paper card games to take advantage of. I mean, it really is. Like, the players would have to do so much stuff to keep track of it, and it's so annoying that, like, even as a player, it would be annoying. Every time I see someone play that card, I'd be annoyed. I'd be like, ah, here we go. Now I have to know every single card in this graveyard. It's just like an annoying thing to deal with. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the almost impossible cards. Or, well, not almost impossible, but the super hard to almost impossible cards to copy. Number one, which is obviously under the hard, is Tectonic Break. It's an 8-drop basic action, which is a sorcery. You have to play it on your turn. For each troop, randomly determine if it is destroyed as follows. Each troop has a 10% chance of not being destroyed for each point of toughness it has. Where's that power? Actually, hang on. I could actually make it out real quick, so let me check. Pop that out here real quick. Yeah, it's toughness. I thought so, but I wasn't sure. Okay. So destroy for each point of toughness it has. So basically, if your guy has five toughness, it has a 50% chance to be destroyed, right? So first of all, the word randomly is so hard for paper games to copy, right? Like, that is like, first of all, the word randomly is the most annoying word in the world for me when it comes to games. I hate the word. I hate the way it works. Like, I hate to have like literally like tons of guys out that are like super high toughness and might have like just a 10% chance to die, and then there's actually a chance that they all could die. Like, that is so frustrating, right? And like, you know, on the other side, right, there could be my opponent could have all creatures that have 80% chances of dying, and they could all live. And it's like such a very frustrating thing for me. Like, I hate the word random. I hate it. I think it's stupid. Anyway, we'll move on to the thing. So, obviously, in card games like Pokemon, we've seen it. Right, they use like coins, right? They use flip a coin. So flipping a coin is a 50% chance, right? So if you flip a coin, there's a 50% chance the effect could happen, right? Once you start getting down to 10% chance, it becomes so much harder to find a way to basically mimic that or in paper card games. And like there could be ways, right? You could use dice or use some other method to get a 10% chance. But the problem is, not only do you have to have a 10% chance, you have to have a 20% chance, and a 30, and a 40, and a 50, and a 60, all the way up to 90 to be able to mimic every effect of this card. And it just becomes hard, if not impossible, to mimic this in paper card games. A card like this, what would happen was they would just make it so like cards with 5 toughness and under have a 50% chance to die. So you would just flip a coin. So it'd be like flip a coin for heads, kill all your troops that have 5 toughness or lower. Tails, keep everything. You could do it easily by doing something like that, but to actually do this card the way it's printed on Hex, it would be almost impossible. I don't think it would be possible. If so, it would be very, very hard. So, moving on to the next card, Replica's Gambit, which I like this a lot. This card's neat. I say neat because it's not particularly awesome, it's just neat. Okay, so, Replica's Gambit, 1 drop. Shuffle target troop you control into your deck. It gets permanent when this troop enters play. If you played it from your hand, create 6 copies of it and put them into play. Draw a card. So basically, if I play old Delver here, right? Okay. I would play Replica's Gambit. I could choose this card. I could put it into my deck, right? If I draw this card again and play it, I make 6 copies of it, right? So that's freaking awesome, right? It's an awesome effect. Very kind of difficult. There's like some decks that can take advantage of it, right? Like anytime you have a tutor effect, this card becomes a lot better because you can tutor for the card that gets the permanent effect. But this card has a bunch of combined things that we talked about earlier, right? It has the word permanent in it, which is so hard to track, right? And then it has this, like, when it comes out, you make 6 copies of the card, right? Like we've had cards in Magic, for example, like Phantasmal Image, right? You play it out, it copies a card that you choose. That's not too hard to keep track of, right? But 6 copies of that card is so hard. And like the only way I can see that you might be able to copy this card would be to take the card, like we said earlier, mark it with a marker or some kind of identification. Whenever your card comes out that plays, you take like Replica's Gambit like tokens with like numbers like 1 through 6 or something, and then put those out. So then that way people realize that like this is Replica's Gambit 1 through 6 of this card. Like it would be so difficult and so hard. So the card is pretty difficult to mimic and so easy for Hexado because it's a digital card game. So, can't say that enough. It is digital, it is awesome. So the next card is Shrine. Now Shrine is a pretty unique card. It's one of those cards I almost didn't put in here because like it does have, it's very similar to a card called Druidic Satchel. I actually looked, I know I have them, I couldn't find them to show you guys. But anyway, it's very close to that card of Magic, but it's a little bit different because it has 2 sets of permanent in it, right? So it's a 2-drop at the start of your turn. If the top card of your deck is a troop, it gets permanent +1/+1. If it's a resource, it gets permanent charge your champion. If it's a non-resource, non-troop, it gets permanent -1 cost. Now, the problem with this card, as far as paper goes, is that it has 2 separate permanents, right? So it gets permanent +1/+1, which is on itself hard to track whenever a card isn't even there yet. And the second part is it gets -1 cost. So what's going to happen is you're going to have like multiple cards in your deck getting these effects. And it's going to be very, very hard to keep track of all of them, if not impossible. It's very tough to keep track of all these different effects. It's hard to be like, okay, this card has +1/+1. Oh, I revealed it again. It gets +2/+2 now. I played it. Now the next card gets +1/+1. Okay, well then I return the +2 guy back to your hand. It's like, and then not to mention the other cards are getting -1 cost. It's just so hard. Like obviously the charge your champion part, that's easy. Like any game could copy that. That's not a problem. But the first two, I mean the first and the last one are very, very tough for games to copy, and it's very confusing. It gets in this really weird, like trying to keep track of things, and it would be very, very tough. So next card. This guy I think is so cool because, like, on the, when you look at him, like, the Legionnaire, when you look at him, like, he doesn't look like he'd be that tough to figure out, right? Like, I think it's very funny how Hex makes some of these cards look like. So it's a 6-drop, 0/0. As the game starts, this troop gets permanent +1/+1 for every 3 humans included in your deck, right? So that's, like, very simple, right? Like, the game knows how many humans you have in your deck, and for every 3, it gets +1/+1, right? So, like, and paper, right, it'd be very tough to deal with this, right? So, like, the only way you could do it is to have, like, the judge walk over to your table, count your humans, which he could do because he would have the list, right? He'd have the list of your deck list. So you just look at your deck list, be like, yes, he has all these humans. Sure, okay, he's a 6/6 or a 7/7 or whatever, right? But that's like, that takes so much manpower, right? Like some tournaments, like especially small tournaments, only has like 2 or 3 judges, right? The bigger tournaments, they might have the manpower to do it, sure. Like the the GPs and the Star City Opens and stuff, sure, they could probably do it, but it'd be so annoying, right? Like for every person that has this card in their deck, they have to devote some kind of special manpower to make sure this card's played properly. Like no, like Wizards of the Coast is not going to make a card that does that. Like it's just so annoying to deal with. The other way is they can just make deck lists like available to your opponent, which like it wouldn't be the worst idea, right? Like that way your opponent could look at your card, look at the thing, and be like, sure, you have this many humans. This card is going to be this big, right? But it's like again, it would take a you'd have to define the tournament. You'd have to change the tournament around to make this card work, and like they're not going to do that for one card, especially a card that's not that good. So. Okay, moving on to the next to last card, one of my favorites, if not my favorite, Old Zombie Plague. I love this card. I don't know why it's want to be a dick and not get bigger, thank you. Which kind of... Alright, so Zombie Plague. Alright, 2-drop. Constant. At the start of your turn, add a plague counter to this constant. Then reveal a random troop from each opposing champion's deck. For each plague counter on this constant, those troops get -1/-1. If a troop's toughness is reduced to 0 this way, revert it, transform it into a zombie, and put it into play under your control. Cool. So basically what happens, it says revert it. That's kind of like the tricky part. Revert it means that like if you have a 5/5 and it dies, right, it reverts back to a 5/5, and then it goes to your graveyard. So what that means is like if they res it back from the graveyard, it'll stay a 5/5. So the thing about this card is that the hardest part for like Magic or another card effect to take advantage of it would be that they wouldn't be able to keep track of the cards revealed. Again, it's the permanent effect that's the tricky part. So like you wouldn't be able to keep track of, hey, this card is a permanent -2/-2. So when you draw it, it would be hard to remember, right? Like the play counter part, it'd be pretty easy, right? Like that's you just use a dice and keep track of that. But the permanent effect is very, very tough. So okay, that's Zombie Plague. Again, one of my favorite cards. I love it. Sick. Going down to the last card of the thing, and this is actually impossible. This card is actually impossible to keep track of. Is the old Inspiration Engine. Tata would be proud. Inspiration Engine is basically created by another card. I should have had the card in here. I'm sorry, I don't. It's actually created by the plans of this card. And basically what this card does is you tap it, you create just a random artifact. So any artifact in the game currently, it could just randomly create it and put it into play, right? And that is almost, literally almost impossible for a paper game to take advantage. There's no way they could do it, right? That they could maybe have like, just have a deck off to the side maybe that's like, you can put 30 or 40 random artifacts in this deck, and then like, when you tap it, you just draw one and play it. Like, they can maybe do that. Another way they can change it is to have it where you randomly play an artifact in your deck, something similar to like Tezzeret or something. Sure, but like to do exactly what this card says on the card is impossible. You obviously can't just snap your fingers and create a card in thin air, and if you could, why would you use that power on a card, not like money or girls or something? I don't know. But this card is actually the only card, in my opinion, that's impossible for paper games to take advantage of. It's been spoiled so far. So that's it. That's my show on I guess cool random effects that only digital card games can really take advantage of. Real quick before I leave though, at the kind of end of the show, I'm going to start answering kind of smaller comments that I can't do a whole show on, right? So real quick, I'm going to move on to. Oh my gosh, I don't think I changed that. Okay, anyway. So real quick, I'm going to take Rune Dick, take his comments. In your opinion, what would be the best idea for Kickstarter backers to do with their booster packs? Some people suggest never opening them, others suggest selling them. What do you think? So, that's not a problem. What I think is that there's 3 things you can do with your packs once the game goes live and we get all of our Kickstarter packs. There's 3 things you can do. You can draft with them, you can sell them, or you can open them. Those are the 3 things you can do. There's actually nothing else you can do with them except just keeping them and looking at them. So I think the best thing to do with them would be to draft with them. Like, if you draft with them, it allows you to win more packs of cards. It lets you practice and get better at the game. Plus, it's kind of like opening them, right? Like, if you open a draft deck and you see a really sweet card or like a money card or like, something that you want to keep, you just draft it. Like, no big deal, right? Like, it's a free draft anyway. It's a free thing. It's not like you're wasting that much money or that much time. Obviously, the problem with drafting is if you're not familiar with drafting or you're afraid you'll lose over and over again, then it's probably not the best option, like for you personally. But in my opinion, I think for almost everyone, drafting is the best. It's going to get you familiar with the cards. It's going to let you, get in there, get competitive, start learning how to play the game. I think drafting the cards by far is the best option. The second option would be you could sell them, right? Like, but the problem with that is because there's so many cards that the Cryptozoic gave us, which is not a bad thing, the market for cards are going to be destroyed, right? So packs of cards are $2 to buy them. They're already projected to sell for $1.50. So that's already 50 cents less. By the time people actually get their Kickstarters and stuff, they'll probably drop to $1. Also, singles are going to be not very, in my opinion, not going to be worth a whole lot for this first set because everyone has so many copies. So like selling your packs or opening cards and selling them as singles, it's probably not going to be a good idea because the prices are going to be so low. And the third option is just to open them, right? So like, that's okay. Like, if you just want to open them and get into the game, start building decks, like, that's okay. You can do that. I think it's much better just to draft with them, but that's also another option. So, if you just kind of want to play casually or play with friends, if you have no desire to play draft, then I would suggest just opening them. So, again, going through it really quick, if you want to get competitive really quickly, learn the game, start understanding the mechanics of Hex, draft all your Kickstarter packs. Or draft some and open some. Like, you can combine them, obviously. If you want to just try to make a bunch of money at the start, selling them would be the best idea. At the very, the first 2 weeks, sure, people might just really want cards. They might really want 4 zombie plagues, so they might, buy them for more than what they would normally be worth in, 3 or 4 weeks. If you want to just, kind of play casually, maybe use your cards in PvE, maybe start building your decks with your friends or whatever, just open them. Have a good time. Open them, invite your friends over, just have a good time opening them. So those are the 3 things you can do and why I think each 3 are cool. Anyway, guys, me and Tata will be starting our new, our 4th episode of our show this Friday, so look for that. Again, we apologize for the lack of episodes. We kind of all took off for 4th of July, so that kind of messed that up, so I apologize. Also, guys, thank you again for all your suggestions, all your comments. They help so much. I mean, this show couldn't happen if you guys don't leave comments, so thank you all for doing that, and I hope you guys enjoyed the 3rd episode of Shaggy TV. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks, guys.